and Environment Committee. And Mr. CLA, why don't we quickly go through the items that we can take care of without a lot of fanfare?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Rafi Operator with the CLA's office. You have a 4-item agenda. We'd like to recommend for consent, item number 2, actually, to receive and file without approval, refer back to the Department of Water and Power for further consideration.
All right, did we receive a letter from the Department of Water and Power?
Yes, yes, we did, and it's been reviewed by the city attorney as well,
Okay.
and they recommended that we receive and file the matter.
Okay, thank you.
We'd like to recommend for consent, item number 3 as well, as approved,
Okay.
and that leaves you with balance of item number 4 and number 1.
Okay, why don't we take 4 quickly, and then we can spend all of our time on item 1.
Okay. Item number 4, City CAO report relative to executing amendment number 1 with Northeast Trees Incorporated for the Garvanza Park Best Management Practices Project.
Okay, do we have a report on that? Let's see. Okay.
Good morning, Mara Carella, Office of the CAO. The Board of Public Works requests authority to execute Amendment 1 to the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of LA and Northeast Trees for the Garvanza Park Best Management Practices Project. The current MOU is funded through a $1 million state grant with a $333,000 city match. Northeast Trees is specifically named in the state grant agreement, which requires that construction be completed by December 2010. The purpose of Amendment 1 to the MOU is to incorporate supplemental environmental project funds, which is from SCM, the Sewer Construction and Maintenance Fund. Garvanza Park is an approved supplemental environmental project required by the Collection Systems Settlement Agreement, otherwise known as the CSSA. Incorporating $1.89 million in supplemental environmental project funds would increase the cost ceiling by about $1.3 million to $3.2 million and expand the scope of work. Funding, as I indicated, funding for the supplemental environmental project funds are supported by SCM.
Let me interrupt you for a second. Now, the completion of this project, will this bring the city into compliance with the terms of the collections settlement agreement?
Part of the part of the collection system settlement agreement requires that the city spend $8.5 million in SEP. So this project would be included in that $8.5 million.
Okay, and there are other projects that we're working on are also being done pursuant to that agreement?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the city's relationship with Northeast Trees to date, has it been one that has been a responsive relationship where they have been able to keep on a timeline? And do you expect the project to be completed in a timely way pursuant to the agreement?
Good morning, Steve Nikata, Bureau of Sanitation. Yes, our relationship with Northeast Trees has been very collaborative, and we anticipate the project, we will work with them to make sure the project is completed per the deadlines.
And the grant funding that they secured independent of the city of Los Angeles, have they been forthcoming in letting the city know that that has been secured and that they use that to leverage opportunities that are mutually responsive to both the city and Northeast Trees?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay, great.
Oh, and I just want to also include that actually the Bureau submitted a change to the amendment. Instead of the $1.8 million change as reported in the CAO report, it will be increased to $2.55 million for a total contract cost of $3.8 million.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Krikorian has now joined us.
Item number 1.
Yeah, let's go to item number 1, and...
City Controller report relative to the Department of Water and Power's letter regarding the feasibility for the transfer of surplus power revenue funds.
Great, all right. We have our city controller here, so why don't we ask her to come to the table first and make her comments, and then we'll go. I may take the cards before we take staff so that we only have 2.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Mr. Krikorian as well. I have with me today John Modlin from Crow Horwath as well as Fareed Safar from my office. As you know, we asked for a audit independent assessment of the review of whether or not the Department of Water and Power could have transferred the $73 million to the City of Los Angeles as part of their annual transfer. As you know, Ms. Perry, and we had conversations in the ERC and others, we were concerned about not only cash flow, but ultimately our reserve fund and our ability to meet our obligations this year, and felt we wanted to know definitively whether or not they could have sent that $73 million. We did hire a team of experts that analyzed various public utilities and a thorough review of the actual letter that was sent to the Comptroller's office indicating they could not make the transfer of that $73 million. The finding of our review indicated that, in fact, they could have sent that $73 million, that the 5 points that they made, and my staff will be able to identify through each of those, could have transferred the money. 3 of the central findings in the audit was that the DWP had done numerous financial projections without an ECAF increase, and their own numbers show that they would have been able to meet their financial targets and goals even after completing a full revenue power transfer to the city. In addition, they had claimed that they needed to increase the reserve fund from the $150 million to $300 million to maintain their bond rating, or they would not be able to transfer the money. And the increase in the reserve fund was a DWP staff recommendation, and in my staff's meetings with their financial advisors and others, although indicated they approved or thought the $300 million was a good idea, it was not that either you had to have that or you would not have or your bond rating would go down. And additionally was the fact that they needed to maintain their bond rating for the $1.21 billion bond sale. And the audit indicated that they needed to sell the bonds immediately, particularly because they backfilled their process of using operating revenue to pay for their capital expenditures until they issued their bonds, which we felt was a very dangerous policy, and also was not a reason not to send the $73 million. For us, the audit really identified the importance of transparency. I know something the council agreed with as well, and the accountability for the city of Los Angeles. When the $73 million was not transferred to the city, our bond rating was, for the city of Los Angeles, went down. And although this was not the only reason for that, it was indicated in the rating agency's documents that, in fact, this was one of the reasons that they gave us a lower rating. And so it is my hope, in talking both to the general manager and to the commission members and commission president and council members, that this review that you have today will look at practices within the department and hold the department accountable for the fact that this put the city in a dire situation without the transfer of that money. And the reason for doing this is to ensure, for as far as the Comptroller's office, to ensure that we never are in a situation again where there has been an agreement that they do not fulfill those obligations, and secondly, that we have the facts. And so that is today why I'm here today. Just one last thing is that they have as you know, a fund balance of over both with the debt reserve trust fund and the cash reserve, felt that they had enough money to be able to send us the $73 million. So at what point, Ms. Perry, you're interested, we do have our staff here present. One of the members of the team was not able to come here today, but is available again as it goes forward to the council. They were here for the AG&E committee that occurred last week. But I appreciate you hearing this item quickly as well.
Where are the members of your staff?
Right here in the front row.
Okay, if you could stick around, I want to at first bring DWP up here, but if they can stay.
Yes, they'll stay. We'll stay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Williams and Mr. Humphreeville, why don't you come up now? Would you like to do that? And then make sure you don't get cut off at the end. And then we'll get Mr. Raj up here. Mr. Humphreeville, why don't you go first?
Dr. Williams?
Right?
After you.
Okay,
Age before
either
good.
one, it's fine. Let's just, somebody talk.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno. DWP, I don't know how the controller even finds what's going on there, because On one side, you have a long-term strategy that differs markedly from the budget that was approved. And I don't know what has happened to those two items within the committee, whether they will go forward to the city council for approval. It's a lot of bait and switch. What happened to the Huron report? What happened to the money that was spent on the strategic plan for 2 years? What's happened to the money for the Imperial Valley geothermals work that was supposed to replace coal? In the long-term strategy, geothermal is kind of out of it. So what happened? Did they finally realize that geothermal isn't the answer and that they don't have an answer for 40% of the total use as baseload? This is a real problem, and it will eventually come and bite us. Will they wait until the very last moment and then spring it? Oh, we got to have another $2 or $3 billion. And as the Sierra Club rightfully pointed out, if you sell off the coal generating rights, that doesn't clean up the air at all. It just makes LA look a little greener, but the skies will remain the same. On the water side of it, they keep playing around with the San Fernando Valley. What's happening? You have 400,000 acre feet of water going to the sea every year. 400,000. That's 2/3 of the total use. So there seems to be a disbalance between the numbers that even perhaps the controller gets versus what the DWP liaisons get.
Thank you, Mr.
Welcome.
Williams, Dr. Williams. All right. Jack Humphreysville.
My name's Jack Humphreysville. I'm with the DWP committee. This is one good reason why we need an independent ratepayers advocate. Where was PA Consulting in this? I thought they did an excellent job previously. There's no question in my mind that DWP and everybody could pay this $73 million. I don't think there was any doubt on anybody's part. This was purely a political action instigated by the mayor. The DWP went into conference on March 31st, went into meetings to increase the rates. They did not listen to Jan Perry or Eric Garcetti and their advice that came from the council. They adjourned the meeting for theoretically 10 minutes. They went into a conference with the board and the mayor's 3 ambassadors from his office. They got on a conference call with the mayor, and they came back 45 minutes later and increased it, despite your recommendations. That recommendation was dinged by the council that night. On April 5th, the DWP sent a letter to the controller saying, we're not going to send the money unless we get the rate increase. A nanosecond later, Wendy Gruhl came out with a report saying the city was going to run out of cash on May 5th. And the next day, the mayor came out and said, we're going to shut the city down. On April 7th, the mayor began his oily backroom meetings with Herb Wesson to figure out how to handle this. And on April 15th, the city council passed, through sort of some shenanigans, a rate increase which was approved. This was nothing but a political action on the part of the mayor to get his carbon reduction surcharge implemented so he could take a lot of credit, despite what the recommendations were in the PA Consulting report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreysville. Mr. Raj, are you here? Mr. Rahman?
Hallway.
He's in the hallway. Hey, can somebody tell Rahman to come in? He's
5 minutes ago.
Huh. Okay. He's going to come back, right? Because he was going to be the lead person today, and why doesn't somebody just text him? Because he's not that far away. I just talked to him. Hey, Wendy, can you text him? Can you text him? And for the record, what's your name?
My name is Mario Ignacio. I'm the Assistant CFO for the
Okay,
department.
Great. All right, why don't we give him a second to come back in? Great. Okay, no, okay. Let's see. Oh, here. We're waiting for Raman to come back in. Mr. Raj. Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to.
Did we have public comment?
Yeah, well, is anybody from DWP in here getting a response from him? While we're waiting, why don't we let's go into public comment very quickly while we're waiting for Mr. Raj to come back. Chuck Ray, why don't you come on up? And Dr. Williams, come back up.
Good morning. I'm Chuck Gray from the Mar Vista Community Council. I'm also the Vice Chairman of the Department of Water and Power Neighborhood Council MOU Oversight Committee. I'm here today mainly to discuss an item in the strategic plan that just came out from the Department of Water and Power relating to the ratepayers advocate. This plan suggests a ratepayers advocate that I think is totally inadequate for the needs of the city. First of all, it's not independent. Secondly, it's going to be underfunded and understaffed as proposed in this plan. I would suggest that some steps be taken on the ratepayers advocate to ensure that it is an efficient, effective organization and that it is truly independent. The head of the office should be selected by say, a panel of ratepayers drawn from diverse segments of the community, so that you have both business, labor, ordinary homeowners, and so on, who can feel comfortable that the ratepayers advocate truly represents all of their interests. Qualifications of a ratepayers advocate should include knowledge of heavy engineering or industrial organizations, business management, and politics. The office needs to be funded at a level significantly higher than the $300,000 or two-person level that's in the strategic plan.
No.
And the ratepayers advocate should have the ability to investigate and review much more than just rates. The entire management or governance of the DWP affect the rates, so it should be a management audit, not just a fiscal financial audit. I can go on and discuss more of my points. I have them written down. I'll submit them to the committee for its consideration.
Thank you very much. You can give to this gentleman here, and he will include it in the record and give us copies. Dr. Williams?
Good morning. Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA, also with the Sierra Club Water Committee and DWP liaison. What's going on with water? DWP and the board, the Department of Public Works are both playing with it. What are they doing with it? They're going to do Proposition O. Oh, the only problem is they need $50 million a year to operate it and maintain it. Elsewise, the screens don't get cleaned and such like that. They tried to get an increase from $27 to $50. Why? In order to generate enough revenue to operate and maintain. Oh, well then DWP is going to have the sewage treatment plants discharging to reclaim areas so that we can increase the water in the San Fernando Valley. It's the easiest, cheapest, low-hanging fruit. Why? Because we need water? Yeah. But there's also a matter of cleaning up the San Fernando Valley aquifers, which are contaminated. By whom? Did DWP contaminate them? Isn't there another deep pocket? There seems to be a focus too much on the ratepayers and on the property owners as far as water is concerned. And it's going to get worse before it gets better, because the DWP and the Public Works have another program, the stormwater program, and they're going to infiltrate and such like that. However, that one is $8 billion by the year 2020 and will require $500 per parcel per year to operate and maintain. Or maybe they'll just put it into the DWP bills. So we don't know, we'd like to have the committee investigate that.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. That marks the end of our public comment period for items that are not on the agenda today. This was your opportunity to comment, and I appreciate it, so that will close our public comment period. Do we have anybody in here from the Department of Water and Power who has been able to get in touch with Mr. Raj? Has he responded? All right, let me come on up here so I can just tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to conduct a committee meeting with staff people who are lower than Mr. Raj. It's very important that he be here to speak. Great, thank you very much. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Raj. Appreciate it. And then, obviously, he can stay here with you, but we needed you here. As you know, we had quite a rancorous discussions during the time period where we were debating the ECAP and the transfer, as was customary on an annual basis to balance our budget. And if there was ever a time where the expression, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's a duck, that would have been it. It, as you know, never made sense to me, and I asked repeatedly, and what was this, 4 or 5 months ago now, about the Debt Reduction Trust Fund, the balance in the Debt Reduction Trust Fund. The day that Mr. Garcetti and I were at the Department of Water and Power, we actually had a letter from bond counsel outlining basically how the trust fund functions and what the purpose of it was, and the limitations there too. And in fact, there was no specific language limiting the Debt Reduction Trust Fund to mitigating requests for rate increases, things like that. So it was well established quite a while ago that we obviously in the council had a problem with that, and I was pretty clear. And I have to say, for the public record, Mr. Raj and I have a very good working relationship, and I see him as a very good soldier on behalf of the department, and I see myself as doing my job too, but we have a mutual professional respect for each other. But in being a good soldier usually takes orders through a hierarchy. And what never made sense to me, and the issue, there's lots of questions we can ask, and we can ask them and who was right and who was wrong, and the council retained PA Consulting, and Jack, for your question, where was PA Consulting? PA Consulting was involved throughout, except that they represent the city council, and so they work at our behest, not at the department's behest and no other office, just at the behest of the city council. And they were quite helpful in helping us to reveal and uncover and stay on point as to why the linkage between the energy cost adjustment factor and the power revenue transfer were utterly inappropriate, and where there were opportunities to mitigate that. So for me, I start at where were your orders coming from to do what you did?
I don't know if the issue, it was an order. I think what we did was we consulted our financial advisors. I mean, obviously, we have them on board for their advice. So it was based on their advice.
And so who are your financial advisors? And you have a hierarchy, as do we. And there's someone in the top of your, food pyramid who helps you decide which direction you will take.
At that moment in time, it was Mr. Freeman. I mean, at that moment in time, Mr. Freeman was the general manager.
So go back over this with me. Mr. Freeman was the boss, and you're taking your information from your consultants, and they're saying, hey, don't do this, don't do the transfer until they give us our rate increase. Yes or no?
No, I'm sorry. That was not their advice, was not don't give the transfer. But they said their advice was that a transfer at that time would not be in the best interest of the department because of the various issues they outlined, which one of them was the rating, the credit rating.
So then whose decision was it to accept that advice and act accordingly?
The decision was made, obviously the general manager made the decision, but the recommendation came from the consultants to the financial services organization, to me, and to the general manager, and then the decision is the general manager's decision.
And who are your consultants?
I'll have I don't know all the names, but Mario can give you the names of them.
Okay, Mario, why don't you give us the names?
Yes, we have several financial advisors on board. They're Gardner Underwood Bacon, Public Resources Advisory Group, and we have a team of underwriting firms also.
Why don't you give us some names?
We have J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, E.J. De La Rosa, Siebert Brantford Chang, to name a few.
So then did all of those consulting firms then recommend not to do the power revenue transfer
No,
at that time?
no. I think the main consulting firms, I think what he's talking about are some of them are the underwriting consultant, but the firms.
Well, break it down for me. What I'm trying to get you to say, and it's pretty straightforward, is you don't act alone and nobody acts precipitously, and you take direction from someone. And I know at that time Mr. Freeman was transitioning out, and I'm not sure how much he was here anyway. And you and I know I was up there and went in the back room a few times to see what I could see. And you were getting advice from a lot of different parties. And so what I'm trying to get from you, and I'll tell you this much, if I was in your position, I would just say, hey, it's not up to me to work this out for you, dude. It's just you're on your own, buddy. And then if I were you, I would just explain it to me in a very direct way, because I think it is pretty simple and linear. And
The advice was given by, I think it was two consulting firms that we talked with. One was, give me the names, the two main consulting firms.
Well, they advise us on some of the metrics that we need to have to maintain the double A bond ratings. And basically, I think what happened is at that time, April 5, when we didn't have the ECAF rate increase approved, based on the projections, the cash flows would dip below the minimum target. And that was the reason for the transfer. The consultants did not tell us not to transfer, but it was violating the minimum targets that were set by the board back in June 2009.
okay, so none of that happened, though. None of those predictions took place, and you actually remained in pretty good stead throughout that whole process, and you actually never touched your debt reduction trust fund. So again, I go back to, I could go for hours about when this happened, give me the documentation, all that, but to me, that's a big waste of time, because the conduct and the behavior that was exhibited, at least externally, is what has led us to this day where we have these initiatives, these oversight initiatives that are going on the ballot. It's the way we feel the council, the deliberative body, wants to see the department be run in the future. So again, if you can just walk me through, what do you call it, a decision-making tree? What's your decision-making tree? Just tell me that. That's really all I want to know.
It comes through through the staff functions, so the financial services, and they have the consultants. They give their advice. It's brought up to me, and based on the totality of the advice that's given, go to the general manager, and the general manager is the one who makes the final decision.
So he's the one who goes thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah, and obviously I'm sure he consults with others, but as far as he is the one who makes the final decision.
So he was kind of in and out, because he wasn't there that much. 'Cause I remember that day in particular, he wasn't there at all.
Yeah, on that particular day.
Yeah, he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And he wasn't in the back either. So, let's look at that narrow couple of days we're talking about, the day when Garcetti and I came up there, and then that night, and he wasn't on site on premises then. So from whom were you taking your direction at that point then?
At that point, I think the decisions had been made. I mean, it was not deciding at that moment what to do. I think a lot of decisions had been made, and we also get advice from our board. I mean, that's what the board is there for. So at the end of the day, the decision.
Yeah, but even though, and now, it's just me and you talking, okay, and
at
everybody
the end
else
of the day,
listening in.
The decision really was the board's.
Yeah, but I was back there, and they were getting guidance. Okay, so most of those people, with the exception of Mr. Sales, don't really have a background in energy, so they don't. Jonathan comes from an environmental background. Ms. Hogan Rolls comes from a nonprofit world and really did not have any background in this. So Tom is really the only one who had a background that's on point and would understand these things without a lot of preparation time. So I can't imagine that you guys who have like 20 and 30 years of expertise in power and water would take direction from people who basically don't have a lot of expertise in this area, with the exception of one commissioner. So, I mean, again, can you tell me, in terms of that, just let's focus on that day, you know, who was directing you that day?
Honestly, that day it was we did make our recommendation, which was very open, but the decision really was made ultimately by the board. I mean, that's the board made the final decision.
So who gave them direction? And Mr. Freeman wasn't there.
Who they consulted with, I'm not privy to the exact consultations, who they had the consultations with.
Okay, well, we'll hold that one. We'll hold that one on the desk for a while, because that, again, you know, I put a big premium on common sense, and that just, you know, that doesn't make any sense, okay? So, that just sounds, Raman, I have to say, that just sounds crazy, okay? And it just sort of feeds into why we're in the position that we're in now, and, you know, doesn't really help. Anyway, so what I want to know is, the DWP claims of protecting the Debt Reduction Trust Fund to ensure the department's credit rating and avoid financial and related tax penalty. Now, history has not borne that out. The Debt Reduction Trust Fund has about $5 million in cash, and I want to know what the department is currently doing to utilize these funds to engage in rate relief and minimize future debt and provide stable city transfers.
Yeah, the Debt Reduction Trust Fund was created in 1997 for the sole purpose of paying debt-related expenses. It is a special trust fund, and it is classified as a restricted fund in the financial statements. Currently, it has 527 million, 29 actually as of May 31 million of trust fund. We've used that in the past years to restructure our debt. And currently, it's there for any market opportunities that are available to the department, and it's also being looked at by the rating agencies as part of their liquidity, part of our liquidity. Currently, as mentioned earlier, we have 300 million as a target for the Power Revenue Fund, and we have the rating agencies consider the Debt Reduction Trust Fund, although restricted, as part of that liquidity, using the 300 million as a gauge for the target. It's about 46 days of cash on hand. The median, as set forth by Moody's and several other rating agencies, is about 125 days. If we add back the DRTF, we get close to it. So it functions as a liquidity, also as a debt service reserve fund, and as well as a hedge to our variable rate debt exposure.
In the midst of all that controversy, it was interesting to note that one of the bond rating agencies reported that your actual operating cash reserves were up to $450 million. So this perceived threat of your cash reserve being diminished or put at risk and risking the bond rating was not actually true.
I believe when they referred to the 450, they were referring to the unrestricted cash as of fiscal year 09, which is June 30, 09, which is part of the audited financial statements.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the Department of Water and Power, I don't believe, has provided documentation showing that its financial advisor recommended the $300 million cash target. Do you have any documentation on that?
We have a letter from Gardner Underwood Bacon on debt service coverage and liquidity. Although they did not say that the target should be 300 million, I can't remember. I don't know how it was written. I believe they say it was adequate at this time. And as I mentioned earlier, the 300 million, if you convert it into terms of daily cash on hand for operating, it's 46 days, which is far below the 125 days that Moody's have in their rating methodology.
I want a copy of that letter.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm on Mr. CLA, would you make sure that we get a copy of that letter so that we can talk about it at a subsequent meeting? And with respect to the $300 million operating cash target that the Department of Water and Power says that it needs to maintain and support its credit rating, then there's I guess in the report, it says that credit rating doesn't hinge on one factor. I think people from the CAO would bear this out. So how do you address this? I mean, how do you respond to this? I think, and I'm guessing that when I read that letter, there will be no sentence in there that says you must maintain a $300 million operating cash target. I guess, and this is a guess, I haven't seen it yet, but I bet it's going to say something open-ended like it may be recommended, it's highly desirable, market standards would indicate that upwards to, I bet you the language will be that non-specific. Just like the bond council letter was on how the debt reduction trust fund can be used. So my assumption is that the department took that small nugget of information and perhaps used it in a way that was most advantageous to the department, but was, again, in my opinion, not fully forthcoming on the fact that it was open-ended in the same way that they were not on the bond council letter with respect to the debt reduction trust fund. So tell me how you reconcile that.
Well, the $300 million, well, no one, not even the rating agencies, will tell you what level your cash levels should be. It is up to the organizations to determine that for themselves based on their circumstances. Basically, when you set your target, you would have to look at several information. One of them is what the rating agencies would recommend organizations to have. As I mentioned, in this case, to maintain your AA, there's 125 days for Moody's based on their April 2008 methodology pure study report. And recently, Fitch actually sent out, June 16, a study group. And when we look at the graph of what their median AA daily cash on hand, it's closer to 120 days. And basically, the power system's operating expenses is about $2.3 billion in a year. If you divide that by 365, you get $6.4 million of operating expenses each day. And if you take the $300 million divided by 6.4, that gives you 46 days. And the unrestricted itself is not sufficient to cover the median for what the rating agencies would like to see for AA. And that's when the debt reduction trust fund comes in to make up the gap there.
So, thank you. Mr. Raj, I'm going to go to Mr. Cardenas next. I just want to say something. You know, the department has highly skilled, highly educated people who are experts in their field, respectively, in power and in water, in engineering, wastewater management, water master. They are some of the most sought after and the most highly regarded people probably in the country in this discipline. And so, and you would be included in that. Professional people who have done this as a career. And I would think that you would be almost offended to be taking direction from people who basically don't know what the hell they're doing, have no expertise or technical competence to give you the advice or the recommendation that you had been given, meaning you generically, you, not just you, but wherever you all took your direction, that you might have pushed back and said to them, this is stupid, this is a stupid approach, it's not borne out by anything substantive or technical, and it's contraindicated, and you know that's because you're an expert in your field, and that's what you're paid to do. And I would guess that 9 times out of 10, you'd keep your job because you would be considered to be the expert. anyone who doesn't come from this discipline, political or otherwise, is not an expert. We're here to ask questions and to challenge the information that is put out on the table for public consumption. But you're being a very good soldier, and I respect that. But I don't think it's necessary. This kind of behavior has put the entire department at risk and called into question its credibility, meaning that we can't necessarily trust what the department. No, we can't trust what the department tells us. And I would again encourage you, because we're about to go through some major charter reforms that will change the way the department is conducted and governed in the future, that you think about my question about the hierarchy and the reporting tree within the department and tell us just very simply who gave you your direction. And I don't think it's any more complicated than that. Everybody's going to ask lots of questions, and we're going to go on a timeline, and you're going to get a lot of information here, but I really don't think it's going to get to the bottom of how the decisions were made in the department. We'll get a lot of, credit rating information, trust fund, how we can use it and all that. And it's basically like a dog with a leash wrapped around its legs. And I don't expect anything to come out of this. Now, I'm seeking to understand. I'm not looking for one person. I go, that's the person, let's blame that person, okay? I'm not like that. But I do know my instincts told me when I was there and I saw it firsthand that none of this made sense. And, I hope that before we finish this session, you can share with us and give us some insight as to your reporting tree and from whom you took your direction or from which people you took your direction. And I don't think it was a bottom-up effort. I think it was a top-down effort. That's just me. Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Who was it from the Department of Water and Power that came to the City Council and stated for the record that the secondary transfer of $73 million would in fact take place and that it would not be connected to the ECAF?
I can't remember being at a meeting when I was personally.
Councilmember Bernard Parks stated that several times, and actually asked some DWP representatives that exact question when he said that earlier on in the year that, or late in 2009, that someone from the Department of Water and Power had stated that even though the transfer was going to be done in two parts, that the second portion was not dependent on anything, as a matter of fact, and specifically not dependent on ECAF.
Yeah, I recall that. I was not there at the meeting, but I remember that question, and then I went back and checked, and I think and I heard the tape to make sure that I was listening to the whole transcript. So it was our CFO, Mr. Peltola, who made that statement, but he did qualify from what I heard on the tape that it would be subject to other factors. So he did say that. He didn't say ECAF in particular, but he did say it would be subject to many other factors. It was him. I remember. I heard the tape.
But it was my understanding that the council was told to expect that $73 million would be forthcoming.
I can't answer that question because I don't know who said that.
Is anybody here from the Department of Water and Power who can answer that question more clearly than that?
I was not there, so.
Is anybody in the room who recollects those statements clearer than that? Sharon? You can come forward and speak on the microphone, please. There's one over here.
This one?
Thank you.
Somebody volunteered?
Your name for the record, please?
Sharon So with the CLA's office. Councilman, if I recall correctly, it was in February when the first transfer came in. And just to be perfectly clear, the CFO was in attendance that day, and he did indicate that the second transfer would be coming, but there was no mention of ECAF whatsoever. It wasn't connected, but there was no mention either.
Do you recall whether or not Councilmember Parks had asked the specific question about the $73 million in that meeting?
No, there was no discussion. It was implied that it would be coming, but there was there was no tie to it whatsoever. There was comments made about debt coverage and a number of other issues, but whether it was dependent upon the approval of the ECAF, that was never mentioned. So it wasn't stated yes, but it wasn't stated no either.
Okay, thank you. Now, when it came to the advice, as the chairwoman was asking about a few minutes ago, it was mentioned the pool of underwriters and bond organizations that sell our bonds, the whole pool. But who actually did the analysis of advice? It's my understanding that Gardner Underwood Bacon was the main ones to actually give opinions and written advice to the department about their cash status and what it would do, any changes in that cash status would do to the department's ratings?
I believe so. You're correct, sir. Is that right?
The letters that were received from Gardner Underwood were mainly about financial parameters and the usage of the debt reduction trust fund. Those are the two.
Were there any letters from them regarding the $73 million potential transfer?
There wasn't.
So they didn't give you written advice, as far as you're aware of, on the $73 million potential transfer?
No.
Okay. So it's like the chairwoman said, there's a lot of generic terms about what bond ratings are all about and how much cash the department has on hand, and generically that it's healthy or not, but no specific mention about the $73 million.
No, not in the letter.
No.
Okay. Who was it from the department that actually was the first one to state that the $73 million perhaps was not going to come to the city, and/or that it was in jeopardy, and/or unless ECAF were to occur, that they would not have the cash flow to do so?
I was the first one to say that at one of the meetings earlier on, and maybe somebody else said that before me, but I do remember saying that at one meeting, yes.
Okay, so you said that?
Yes.
And you said that based on what information, or based on what
Based
action?
on, again, from information and advice from our bond counsel as to what we need to maintain as our minimum debt coverage and the financial dollar that they mentioned to us.
And bond counsel specifically who? Does that bond counsel have a name?
No, it's not bond counsel.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Basically, well, the parameters were set back in 2009, April or June, I can't remember. There was a verbal motion at the board, and they've set minimum targets for debt service coverage, liquidity, as well as capitalization. And from what management is saying is that once one of them will be violated, which is the $300 million minimum target if a transfer is made, and that's where it came from.
So in early 2009, there was a verbal motion, I'm assuming that was acted on by the board?
Yes.
That became policy at the Department of Water and Power in early 2009 at a board meeting that was enacted. And then in early 2010, somebody, according to the CLA, Sharon, somebody from the department mentioned that the $73 million basically was still fluid enough to where it was going to come to the city, correct? About a year later.
Yeah, I heard that tape, and it says the subject to certain conditions. I don't know exactly, but it didn't say.
But it sounds like since that moment and the time that you came to council, then all of a sudden somebody remembered that you have this policy. What happened between those two statements in early 2010?
I cannot speak for the other statement. I was not in the room, and I don't
But
know.
Mario just mentioned that the policy was set in 2009.
And he's right.
Sharon So said that she recollects that the CFO from the Department of Water and Power actually made a statement that the $73 million was still actionable, right?
But he also went on to say subject to certain factors, and that's what I remember. I heard the
Okay,
tape.
so now I'm getting back to what caused you to make that statement. Were you given a written directive to make that statement? You were given, wait, excuse me, Ramon.
Yes, sir.
You received a phone call saying, Ramon, you need to be the one to report to the city council the bad news that the $73 million is now in jeopardy. How did it come about that you verbalized that to the council on the record? How did that come about? You just woke up one day and then all of a sudden you decided to read all the documents and then you came to that conclusion on your own? Or you were advised as to that was going to be the position of the Department of Water and Power? How did it come about that you, because that's a strong statement to make, and that's a very uncomfortable position for anybody to be in, right? So how did it come about that you came to the conclusion? What got you there?
It was based on, as Mario said, it was based on, we had our guidelines from the board, a directive from the board as to what our financial metrics should be. And then the staff from the financial services, they had their input from their financial advisors as to what was happening and what can happen and what we have to maintain that at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And I was advised that if we made...
There you go. Who advised you?
But the financial services organization, I mean, I was advised by the CFO and the staff that if we made the transfer, then we would drop below our metrics that were signed on by the board.
Now, you were advised by a third party to the department. You interpreted that information, and then you made the decision to make that statement?
I didn't interpret the decision, the information, because I'm not an expert on finance. But the financial services organization, which is CFO, they interpreted the advice and told me that this is what it would mean. But then I took that and I went to the general manager. I said, if we do this, this is what would happen. And it was the general manager's decision. I don't make that decision. It's a general manager's decision.
Okay, so you were given information, and then you transposed that dialogue to the general manager, and the general manager was who at the time?
Mr. Freeman.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
And you had a face-to-face with him and that very uncomfortable dialogue, or you talked to him over the phone?
I had several face-to-faces with him, so I can't remember. I mean, we've talked about this many times, but not one conversation, so we talked about this several times.
So you talked to him about the $73 million that you knew was going to be received very badly by the city council, and you had several conversations with the then head of the department, David Freeman. And in those conversations, was there anything that you recollect or you remember that his reaction was to that? Did he say, oh my gosh, the council's going to be upset? Did he say, you know what, tough cookies, that's just the way it goes? What did he tell you?
Well, two things. One, I don't think I ever said to the council or to him that we cannot make the transfer. I said I could not recommend that to the board. That was my statement. I cannot recommend to the board because the ultimate decision is not mine or the general manager's. It is the board's decision whether they want to.
And what did the general manager say? Did he say, well, let's see what the board says? What did he say?
There was, like I said, there were several conversations. I can't recall every one of them. Yeah, he wasn't, he didn't, obviously was not, he knew it was not going to be a happy situation. He did say that.
So what did he direct you to do? Because he is your boss, right? He was your boss at the time. So what did your boss direct you to do in those conversations, ultimately when you eventually stopped talking to him about it and you had an action to take?
The action to take was to state to the council, which I did, that I could not recommend in good conscience at that time, based on the information that I had, to make to the board to make that transfer. Okay,
so you stated it to the council before you deliberated, or you gave it to the board for them to deliberate? You stated to the council your statement about the $73 million.
And I could not recommend to the board, yes, sir.
So you came and made a statement to the council before you dialogued with the board or reported to the board so that they could determine?
I'll have to go back and look at the dates. I can't remember whether we had the board meeting before that or at that day. I'll have to check the dates.
But see, that's the crux of why we're here. We want to know how it came about. We want to know the timeline, the dialogue, the occurrences that took place before the City Council of Los Angeles heard for the first time that the $73 million is not forthcoming. That's what we want to get at, Ramon. And so the thing is, with all due respect, I know you very well. You're a very smart guy.
Yeah, he is.
And you know this business very well. And you're sitting before the policy committee of the City Council. You know what the agenda says. I would assume, I'll ask you now, did you read the controller's report?
Most of it, yes, sir.
Yeah, you're familiar with the controller's report, so you have a pretty good idea of what we're going to be asking you. Not exactly, but a pretty good idea of what we want to know. And for you to not be ready to tell us the dialogue that you had with your boss, your direct boss, because you're somewhat, and as hierarchy goes, you're kind of like second in command over there, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, for you not to be able to tell us what took place in those meetings, and then in what order between those meetings and talking to the board and coming to report to the council, you need to come back and have that information for us.
I'll definitely have that.
Because the thing is, what happened, happened, and it's behind us, somewhat. But what's not behind us is, what is going on over there? What kind of appreciation for the policy structure that this city has in place? What kind of respect for that process does the Department of Water and Power have on a day-to-day basis? I could recite for you chapter and verse, or you could recite for me chapter and verse what the structure is in this city and how decisions are supposed to be made and the checks and balances, but that's beside the point. I believe that in this particular case, something went wrong where the proper appreciation for that process was not adhered to.
We're going to have to go down to council meeting, but as luck would have it, we have some time set aside for Thursday. And it's already, I think, has the notice gone out yet?
It has not gone out.
All right, so we'll be doing this again on Thursday, and we're going to continue this discussion. I just want to share one last thought with you, Mr. Raj. You know, I wanted to highlight the credentials of the people in the department, and that they're extraordinarily well-educated and highly competent people. And, you know, sometimes when you get into a situation where maybe you feel obliged to protect people that you report to, I want you to know that there was a request made to me as chair of the committee after I think your hierarchy had been instructed not to have meetings with council offices. This individual used a proxy to try to get me to meet with him in a warehouse, you know, off campus. And I actually found it kind of funny, because, you know, I thought that's kind of ridiculous. And I didn't do it because I thought it was utterly ridiculous. I had already known that he was told not to have meetings without prior approval from the mayor's office, and so he was trying to do it anyway through a proxy. So I'm sharing that with you so that you can have a perspective. You are an incredible manager in terms of your protocol, and I respect that, but I am suggesting that perhaps you need to open yourself up to giving us some perspective and insight as to the way Mr. Cardenas put it, what's going on in there. Because it doesn't make sense, and maybe the person you're fighting to protect doesn't deserve it. Anybody else? Mr. Krikorian? Mr. Perez? Then we're going to do this again on Thursday, so if you want to make short comments, Mr. Alarcon is here too, and then we're going to go downstairs because we're going to have to make a quorum.
Don't need an answer.
I love those guys. Okay.
Thursday.
Well, my short comment, but maybe you can answer this on Thursday, is I haven't heard a response to the audit. And the audit basically, at the end of the day, says the DWP intentionally, or apparently intentionally, misled the council into making a transfer based on information that didn't prove to be correct. We took this seriously enough that in my committee, which none of the, 10,000 employees of DWP found it fit to show up to, we actually asked that the city attorney look into whether there was any criminal action taken, whether it rose to that level by deceiving the city, or attempting to deceive the city into giving a rate increase to get this power transfer. I think this is serious stuff, so hopefully on Thursday you'll be prepared to address some of the points of the audit itself. Also, another question I will ask, so you can be prepared on Thursday, is whether anyone ever discussed the impact on the city. Since some of this was so speculative, did it ever come up that at the time it looked like being short the $73 million could put the city in a negative balance situation? Actions have been taken, things have gone differently, so we're not in that position.
but that could have actually driven the city into negative numbers and increased the talk about bankruptcy that some people like the ex-mayor were trying to float. So I'd appreciate your ability to answer those two questions on Thursday.
We'll do that.
Mr. Alarcon?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Raj, you know, I sued the city related to the transfer issue and have a longstanding issue about transferring the amount of money that we do from DWP. When the board made its decision to increase the amount from 150 to 300, and then again when a decision was made by somebody to suggest that the 73 million was not available, was there any consideration about what was in the best interest of the ratepayers? And could those decisions have been made as a result of a desire to protect the ratepayers' interest? And is the transfer to the city of Los Angeles in the best interest of the ratepayers?
Some of the discussions, around that topic did, of course, have the ratepayer issue very much up in the forefront, because if we did take some of the actions, like make the transfer, and it downgraded us, and the cost of carrying money then would be more, so then we would have to pass that on to the taxpayer. So all those definitely were taken into consideration, yes. So it would have been more problematic for the ratepayers had we made the transfer at that time. That's what we were pretty sure that would happen if we were downgraded, yes, sir.
Okay, well, perhaps you could expound on that on Thursday in terms of what was the thinking? I mean, your primary interest is to protect the ratepayers, not to satisfy the whims of the mayor and city council.
Absolutely.
And so I think we need to understand why exactly those decisions were made from the perspective of protecting the interests of the ratepayers. And I've always felt that transferring money from DWP was counterproductive for the interests of the ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. Stay tuned. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, I mean, this is obviously a matter of gravest significance to the city and to the future of the DWP's credibility and in Mr. Buettner's avowed commitment to increasing transparency and accountability. And respectfully, we can't do this in an hour. We can't do this in 3 hours. I hope that we'll continue this dialogue on Thursday. Unfortunately, my schedule is pretty well booked already for Thursday, so that's not going to be adequate either. So this is, Madam Chair, I hope that this will be an ongoing dialogue that will happen over the course of perhaps several weeks, because I have pages of questions to ask about this audit, and it's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen on Thursday. So I hope that this is going to be a long and robust and detailed, substantive conversation that we're able to have. And to start that dialogue, I plan, Mr. Raj, to submit some questions to you in writing, and I'd like to have those answers to those questions prepared. I'd like to have someone prepared to answer those questions when we do come back and discuss this. It's not going to be all-inclusive. It's not going to be exhaustive, but I want to at least hit a few points. And will we have someone from the Comptroller's office back as well, Madam Chair?
Yeah, he's here right now. Gentleman, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Come and say it into the mic. Their name.
Ferris Safari, the Comptroller's office, and I have John Muglin from Crow Horwath.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll probably have some written questions for the Comptroller as well then. Thank you.
Great. All right. So we will hold this item in committee, and we will see you Thursday, and then we'll work on setting the one after that.
Beautiful.
This could go on for a very long time, Mr. Raj.
No, well, we'll do whatever we can to make sure that we share all the information that we have.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, so then that marks the end of our agenda. Okay, thank you. Well, let's start working on the date after that, too.
Okay.
Can you stand this up? Oh, I think that we already know the answer. They just have to say it.
So,
But and all the other questions.